How is nobody talking about this girl? Da Vinci, Monet, Van Gogh, all bad bitches. But like, can we talk about Mary Cassatt? Hello? For a class, I have to hold a presentation on Mary Cassatt, so I did some research in a public cafe. I was sobbing. QV, you're in a cafe, and I'm sitting next to you. Like an insane person. So Mary Cassatt, who is it? She's an impressionist artist, and she's known as an American impressionist artist. For context, impressionism is the art epoch that, for example, Monet are known for. What comes to my mind when I think of impressionism, a lot of vibrant colors, blurred edges. The paintings were done quite quickly, like to capture a moment, to capture an impression of a moment. That's where the name comes from. Mary Cassatt, she was born in America.
I'm out here in Wyoming.
During the high time of impressionism, so the 19th century, the capital city of the art world was Paris, France. And Mary Cassatt, our artist, also lived in France. However, she was born in America, in Pennsylvania specifically, like Taylor Swift. She was born into a wealthy family. Her father was a stockbroker. The Cassatt family originated from France, Scotland, and Ireland. For a period of time during Mary Cassatt's childhood, the family moved back to Europe. They moved to Germany and France for sure. And that's also where she learned French, and she became kind of bilingual-ish. That's also how Mary Cassatt was introduced to the art world. At 16 years old, Mary Cassatt enrolled at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. Originally, her father was not a fan of the idea of his daughter pursuing art, but on the other side, Mary Cassatt had the support of her mother. Cassatt had a pretty close relationship to her mother and also her sister Lydia. In total, she had 6 siblings, but Lydia is the sibling who I noticed in the paintings the most often. By the way, Mary Cassatt's mother is described as a feminist. She also had quite progressive views considering the time. Aside from the fact that natural philosophers considered women to be lesser beings, who thought that it would be toxic for women to try to learn because their little brains would be so overwhelmed by trying to comprehend what they were reading. It was kind of a shitty time for women. At the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, women's education was also limited. First of all, it was impressive that women were even allowed there because, for example, at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris,
which was like the most renowned art school, art academy of the time,
women were not allowed in there. However, even at this academy in Pennsylvania, their education was very limited, for example, in the sense that they could not participate in live drawings. Of course, you have to somehow learn anatomy, and at the time, they couldn't just roll up Pinterest and look at some naked bodies. They would learn it via nude drawings, for example. However, the poor women's eyes, they could not handle that. They were very limited in other aspects as well. And after a few years of studying at this academy, Mary Cassatt said, okay, I've had enough. I've decided we're going to Paris. I mean, she already knew French. She has already lived in France. So while it is a huge thing to immigrate to another continent, like at the time back then, at least she's already familiar with the place she's moving to. Now, Mary Cassatt's father, initially, of course, he was not a fan of this because it sounds crazy, and also it sounds crazy expensive. And you know what? We gotta look at it through his perspective, kind of. In America at the time, female artists, they were not a huge thing. Instead, from his perspective, it was just his daughter had some idea that she wanted to paint because she liked art so much. But of course, there was no future for female artists, no career or anything like that. So it would just seem like a whole waste of money. And also, like, it's the time for her to find a husband. So like, he's just probably just trying to look out for her. Also, he cannot protect his little girl overseas. It was really scary. But despite how scary it was, Mary Cassatt's mother supported her. From what I've read on Mary Cassatt's mother, she was a woman that believed women can do anything, or at least like, my daughters shall grow up to be strong women and have confidence in their abilities. I feel that gives us a good insight on how Mary Cassatt's mentality worked, like how she was raised and how she sees the world and herself in it. So Mary Cassatt immigrates, attends the studio of Jean-Léon Gérôme. This was around 1865, so when she was 21. Jean-Léon Gérôme, I don't know a whole lot about him, but I've seen a lot of his work. And not only are they incredibly skillful, but they also tell these intense, impressive stories.
Barbecue sauce on my titties.
Like, they're just one still life, but you can see so much in it. It's like just one still life, and it feels like a movie. They're partially on mythology or their depictions of foreign cultures, which is such an interesting perspective because you don't see a lot of foreign impressions of the time. After some years, when the Franco-Prussian War broke out, Mary Cassatt had to briefly return to the USA. However, then she decided not to go back to Pennsylvania, but instead to move to Chicago for a while. But very unfortunately, a lot of her early works got burned in the Chicago fire in 1870. 1971. And for artists, losing your artworks, especially in a fire where it's like you cannot get them back at all, there's no trace of them, and she couldn't even take pictures of them because they didn't have phones. It was just gone. All her work of these past like over 10 years is gone. And that is the first worst nightmare of an artist that Mary Cassatt had to endure. After that, Mary Cassatt returned to France, and by the way, she was joined by her mother when she emigrated to France. At the time, women could really go anywhere like all by themselves. It would be too dangerous. She opened her own studio, and simultaneously she joined the studio of Charles Chaplin. Now that is not to be confused with Charlie Chaplin. I did not know about this dude beforehand, but I checked out some of his works and oh, feminist icon. Almost only drew women. He drew them in a way that it feels like he understood women. Like, in his artworks, it's just pure femininity, and there's honestly soul in these pieces. They're also very realistic. It feels like he really loved women because also his studio was exclusively open to female students for the time. Crazy. Not only that, but he also let the women participate in live drawings, so they saw. Now, if you're hearing what I'm hearing, this sounds like a paradise, like a dream come true for Mary Cassatt. However, she was actually dissatisfied. She disliked how exclusively conventional art was made there. Her creative freedom was limited there. Oh wait guys, here comes one of my favorite parts. I think it is also in 1874 where Degas first saw one of Mary Cassatt's paintings somewhere, and he said, "Here is someone who feels like I do." And then right there is the start of a lifelong, pure, soul-touching friendship. Degas is a French impressionist. He's hella well known, especially for his paintings of ballet dancers who nowadays you might look at his paintings and be like, oh my god, that's so classy, that's so elegant, so many ballet dancers, that's ooh la la. Because nowadays ballet fancy. But at the time, ballet dancers kind of did sex work behind the stage. They would shake their ass on stage and then go behind stage, see all the old rich men and be like, who wants some crusty ballet dancer toes? So in fact, Degas' pieces have kind of a dark side to them. Nevertheless, they're still beautiful, and I do you know that one TikTok that that was me right now. Anyways, I had the honor of seeing one of Degas' paintings in real life. I took like 30 minutes just walking around it. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Oh my god. I'm in love with it. It's the statue of a little ballerina, I think it's called. I don't know. That's kind of what it looks like, except I had to crouch down because I wanted to fit in the screen, but let's get back to business. Degas invited Cassatt in 1877 to join the Impressionist group. Low-key very much a YN moment because Cassatt had already been a fan of Degas. In other words, they had been fans of each other before they even knew each other. And both of them had said, when I saw the other one's artwork, I felt so understood. And so they felt this connection already before they even met each other, and that's so wonderful. I have a quote from Mary Cassatt. The first sight of Degas' pictures was the turning point of my artistic life. I used to go flatten my nose against that window and absorb all I could of his art. It changed my life. I saw art then as I wanted to see it. In other words, her idol just came up to her one day and asked her, bro, I love you. Do you want to join my group? Like, imagine One Direction is coming to your house and it's like, I saw that TikTok where you sang a cover of our song when you were like 11 years old. Do you want to join our group? That's basically the equivalent. Cassatt, of course, accepted the offer and joined the Impressionist group, and she was the only American in there. All the others were French. However, there were in fact one or two other female artists in there, and she befriended the group very well. And I think she felt very at home in that group because she spent pretty much the rest of her life drawing as an Impressionist, and she gained a lot of success, especially in Paris. She was not very popular in America at all because in America they were kind of more conservative. Lady artists weren't really a thing, so on the rare occasions when she returned to America for short periods of time, she would then be underappreciated. Paris was the place where Cassatt had a career, a successful career for her art. And wait, I have another quote, guys. I came prepared. Women do not have to fight for recognition here if they do serious work. So the chances in the artwork for the different genders were not equal at all. However, they at least had the possibility to make a career for themselves, the women. Cassatt and Degas' friendship is something I have I don't want to be dramatic, but I would almost say I've never heard of it in history where two souls are so interlinked without there being romance involved. I should be more specific. Souls of different genders. Because normally when men and women like each other, then they get married. However, Cassatt and Degas, no marriage, no kids. Aww. When you look at Mary Cassatt, it will say American Impressionist artist who painted art on motherhood. But then Mary Cassatt never was a mother. What? I don't mean this in a judgmental way, of course, but that's just what you would expect, like, of a person who spends her entire life and forms her entire legacy on motherhood paintings that she herself would probably find inspiration from her own life as a mother, especially at the time where everybody and their mama was a mama. But no, Mary Cassatt stayed a single woman all her life. At the time, that was crazy. Back then, having a husband was almost a means for survival because your husband was your income and your stability. But Miss Mary Cassatt, she casually invented girl bossing. Before the world was ready for it, Mary Cassatt decided to become a career woman. She didn't need a husband, she didn't need a man because she had herself, she had her skills, and she had her passion and talent. She made a life for herself. As I was doing research, I was wondering, well, you can chase a career while also having a husband. My thoughts might have been too simple-minded in this aspect, but we're gonna ignore that. Why didn't she just marry Degas? I mean, they seemed so close. Just assumed that they must have loved each other in a romantic way also. I then jumped to the conclusion that Degas must have already been married, and so Mary Cassatt was the other woman. And that was not the case. Degas also spent his entire life unmarried and no kids. I was then thinking, is something keeping them apart? Maybe they cannot get married because of different religions or their families don't like each other, like Romeo and Juliet style. Or what if they are both gay and they kind of are in a lavender friendship? I think that's just wishful thinking for some representation. The answer is actually very easy. Just they had no romantic feelings for each other. Instead, it was just a very intimate, platonic friendship, or rather creative coexistence. Cassatt and Degas spent their entire lives working together. They chronically inspired each other's work and admired each other's work. Degas has a few portraits of Cassatt. I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to like ship them romantically. It might have sounded like that a second ago when I was like, it's just so rare to see men and women being genuine friends. So when I encountered these two, at first I couldn't believe it, but it's just such a pure friendship, and I think it's so wonderful that this exists. They are the prime example that platonic soulmates do exist, and that it is not necessary to get married. There's this one very well-known painting of Cassatt where
Degas
strongly advised her and also painted some parts of it as well in the background. It's called Little Girl in a Blue Armchair, and in this context I actually have an excerpt of a letter that Cassatt wrote. I wanted to come back to your place yesterday to talk to you about the portrait of the little girl in the blue armchair. I had done the child in the armchair, and he found it to be good and advised me on the background. He even worked on the background himself. I then sent it to the American section of the Grand Exposition 79, but it was refused. Since Mr. Degas had thought it good, I was furious, especially because he had worked on it himself. At the time, it seemed new. What's really interesting is how Mary Cassatt expresses that she is annoyed by this refusal, not because of all the work she put into it, but because, oh, Degas worked on it. He put so much effort into it, and yet they refuse it. Like, girl, what about yourself? Just goes to show how much respect they have for each other. I need to hurry this up because my phone is running out of storage. But they kept working together for the rest of their lives. However, let me just skip over like 100 years of their lives. Mary Cassatt dies. No, actually, Degas dies first. Degas dies 10 years before Mary Cassatt dies. Mary Cassatt struggled with her eyesight throughout her life. However, then when Degas died, she went blind, like pretty much full-on legally blind after that. She could not do art anymore, so not only did she lose her passion, but she also lost her best friend, her soulmate. In one swoop, she lost a lot. I'm not gonna say she lost her life because she still lived for 10 years after that. However, a lot of what made her alive was taken from her in those past 10 years. I don't know about those last 10 years exactly. That is when I started crying in the cafe when I read, oh, he died before her, and then she spent those last years in total blindness, robbed of everything that she spent her life doing. Sorry, I totally just flipped over like that whole chapter. Like it is such a big deal, but I genuinely don't have the time to go into it more. I think in biography stuff you should not focus on like how their lives ended. Instead, let's look at the legacy, let's look at what they left, let's look at all the happy moments, let's look at all the joy they had in their lives and all the beauty, and not at the tragedy of their lives, because that's only such a small fragment of their legacy. Like who gives a fuck about that? Okay, that was a bit harsh, but like you should focus on all the other things that they want you to see. They don't want you to see like how they're like their worst times. They want you to see everything that they made with pride. So let's focus on that. With the rest of this video, I'm going to go into her art style a bit more. Her art style of course fell under the category of Impressionism. However, one thing that made her different from the other Impressionists was the use of the color black. Now she used very vibrant colors, a lot of pastel colors, beautiful colors, like very happy and feminine colors, I would say. However, yeah, she also used black. In her paintings, the motifs were partially flat. Another thing she did was work with patterns a lot. Now that is a feature that you see in Japanese traditional art a lot, and a lot of Impressionists or a lot of modern artists got inspiration from Japanese art. Cassatt's artistic style was also recognizable by the loose brush strokes, so she still managed to work in like very clear separation lines between the motifs. Okay guys, I ran out of storage and I keep deleting videos, but like I need to end this video in like 1 minute, so let me hurry up. So social commentary, girly is a feminist, okay? Mary Cassatt is a feminist icon, but like you wouldn't think that because all of her works are very like kind of twad-wivey, except they aren't. They're just like, they show typical womanly photos or like motherhood. You just think like, oh, women hanging out, blah blah blah. You don't think much of it. However, then when you look behind it, then you're like, wow. She the subject of a lot of her works are like women's intelligence and like women working together. And for example, there's this one mural that she did where it's like women like picking fruit from a tree, like the Garden of Eden, women picking fruit from a tree, but it's evil. Except here it's not evil, it's good. It's like a symbol of intelligence, and then they hand down the fruit to younger women, so women help each other to grow stronger and to grow smarter in a world that defies them, and blah 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 blah. There's this piece at the opera where this woman is just at the opera minding her business, and another man is like in the background like staring at her like predatory, and it's also like social commentary on gender situations. You wouldn't think that, but like if you really look, then you can see it, and like she does it in such a simple way. And there's also a lot of paintings where she draws women reading, and also like reading smart books, reading newspapers, and like you wouldn't think that because like, oh, the women can't handle it and they're too stupid for everything, but they can, and she shows it. But like she makes it look so natural, and it's like womanhood, this is womanhood, and she's a feminist icon, but like a feminine feminist icon. That's amazing. Her art reception, now last point, I hope I can finish it, if not then bye bye. Art reception is in France. Icon pussy popping. USA, bitches were conservative, so no pussy popped. But then the question is she French or is she American? Is she a French artist or an American artist? Because nowadays she's remembered as an American impressionist, as an American artist, one of the greatest American artists, blah 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 blah. But like this bitch, this girl spent her whole life in France, like over 60 years in France. I would say she's French. However, in both countries she felt this feeling of otherness, because in France, even though she was fully integrated, she was still like the American kind of. She was American, but like her career did not fit into America, so it was like, what the fuck? And it's like cultural hybrid. I don't even know, I'm just throwing words out. But 2 quotes and then it's over. If I have not been absolutely feminine, then I have failed. Period, queen. I love this. I would get it tattooed on my butt cheek. Love it. Then women should be someone and not something. Period. Feminist icon. And that's it. I have no sources for you. Just believe me. I know everything. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself. Search more on Mary Cassatt. Guys, I have 200 subscribers now. My last video is like my most viewed video now. I'm famous now. I'm gonna drop out of uni. I will be moving to LA and I will get a BBL. So follow me along for that journey. What do you want to see of my content? Do you want to see, I don't know, like anime nerd shit? I can do it. I can shake ass for you. What do you want to see? I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself, and I will see you very soon. Bye bye.